Whelen Engineering California Spec or Style or California Model lights. What are they and what do I have lying around? Well, when we think about California lights, we usually think about front facing steady burn red, at least one, and rear flashing amber, at least one. Um, this has been a thing in California for a long time by statute or title. The front facing steady red is sometimes the only light, and the rear flashing amber is sometimes the only light. There's been California Highway Patrol studies that talk about when this is safer. We're not going to get into that. We're just going to get into what we have and what that is. And long before manufacturers made these lights on purpose, fire shops and police shops were making them themselves. Following that, there were California specific model lights made. A lot of those kind of adapted what was already being made in shops and in the field and made them into actual models. There's also some crossover there. For example, this isn't a real model. This is simply adding a rear amber lamp and a front red lamp to an existing light. This was never manufactured by Whelen and would be a field modification. This particular Commander version had a par 36 front-facing strobe. That could easily have been made into a steady red light California style. Was it ever? I don't know. It could have been. So that would be a field modification. So then that brings us to what are we really going to count? This fire authority lamp was a strobe light that just had a red steady burn signal stat lamp screwed to the front of it. Does that count? I don't know. It's a shop modification. But it's worth showing in this context. I believe the clear band on the lamp is the wrong dome, but it really doesn't matter. The point is that this is another example or a later example of bolting a steady burn red to the front of an existing product to make it California compliant. But as mentioned, manufacturers did come out with solutions. The twin beacon ray California version, or CT1, was a steady burn red and amber flashing lamp under a beacon on one side and a rotating beacon on the other. This was one of the first crossbars, if not the first crossbar, designed for California compliance. Crossbars were easy to make California compliant, and the early Whelen crossbars could easily be made California compliant, but I don't see any mention in literature specifically of models aimed at that market. However, it would have been extremely easy to simply substitute in a par 46 steady burn or flashing lamp in place of a strobe in one of their housings, and I'm sure that was done. Moving on to the later crossbar series, again, I don't see any mention in the literature of this being a thing, but it would have been super easy to do, and I'm sure it was done. There would have been a lot of different ways to do it. You could get pretty creative with crossbars, and making them California compliant wouldn't have been a exception to that. These are actually strobes in this picture, but they very easily could have made the driver's side front steady red and the driver's side rear flashing amber. And then along came the Lightbars. The California Twin Sonic, or CTS1, incorporated that front-facing steady red and the rear amber flasher into a Lightbar package. It was the first, if not among the first, light bar package that was California compliant. And it's kind of what everyone thinks of when we talk about California compliant light bars. And we all remember Squad 51 had one, and they were pretty popular. And then along came the Aerodynamic, and as you can see, sometimes they were supplemented, and pretty much every bar thereafter had a California version. Other manufacturers got in on the fun, almost directly copying the California Twin Sonic in construction and function. Very, very similar setups many times. A lot of times just simply tossing in those steady burn and rear amber flashers in the place of a different lamp. You saw this across the board, and Whelen was no exception. But remember, again, the shop. Once the shop gets involved, what is a California product and what is something the shop modified to make it that way, even though models existed? It's kind of debatable, but anybody could make pretty much any light bar California compliant with minimal effort. And is that cheating? Well, for the example of this video, we're going to say it's cheating. If you look at this abomination that was put together, yeah, it would be a California compliant setup, but it's not factory anything. But sometimes that wasn't a bad thing. LAPD put their alley lights on the outside of the light bar because the factory alley lights on the Aerodynamic blocked the side flash. That was a great aftermarket modification made by the shop. And in addition to that, they took their takedown lights and added a Code 3 brand headlight flasher so that the center takedown lights also functioned as clear flashers. Whelen didn't necessarily offer a 6000 bar that was California compliant, but again, it could have been super easily made. The first mention of a California bar that I can find is in the 8000 series, and it was pretty much a California Twin Sonic 8000 series bar. It doesn't mean you couldn't have made one otherwise, but they did have specifically one listed with the C designation for California compliant. And you would see these bars from time to time, and sometimes one would be left wondering whether it was an original California Spec bar or something someone put together aftermarket. California lights were usually shown as driver's side only, but in practice they were often passenger and driver's side. The examples that I have in my collection almost always have them on both sides. The original Edge matrix for Whelen showed it on the driver's side, and the amber flasher on the driver's side as well. However, they did leave you the option to place an additional red steady burn. Again, the examples that I have in my collection of older Edge bars actually have driver and passenger side red steady burns. It doesn't really matter. It's just a matter of departmental taste, I think. In this particular case, this is a red and blue light bar. Whelen Edge, an early model J-tube version. Not the earliest because it has rapid rate, but one of the early, before the turbo tube version. But it does have driver and passenger side steady burn red lights, even though it's a red-blue bar. So that was not uncommon. The red lights can be pretty overpowering, and I think that might have been one of the reasons some departments didn't do that. In place of the driver's side steady burn, you often got a takedown, and then that would leave room for flashers instead of the takedowns in this case. The question is just, did you want dual takedowns, a single takedown, a single flasher, dual flashers, or dual California lights? And in this case, they went with dual California lights. This being a slightly later J-tube bar, it did have the option to increase the flash rate on the corner strobes. There's only 4 strobes in the whole bar. Interestingly enough, the rapid rate is not California compliant. It's too fast to count as a, quote, California pattern. But this bar had dual rear flashers, only one of which was amber. The front of the bar, like I said, it's just the dual California lights, a strobe on each end, and takedown lights. The rear of the bar goes red flasher, amber flasher, blue flasher, and then the 2 strobes. That's not an uncommon setup. Sometimes you would see 2 amber flashers and then a red and a blue. This one just happens to have the blue side not have an amber, which was also a common thing to see. Sometimes they would pair the red and the amber, but leave the 2 flashers blue. It just depended on the department. This particular light bar didn't have a whole lot of modifications. The alley lights and takedowns don't flash. So really to the front what you're getting is steady burn and strobe. The next light bar that I have in my California collection is an all red bar, and that bar has the dual front steady reds, a pair of front halogen flashers, corner strobes front and rear, and only 1 set of rear flashers. So there's a blank spot to the rear of this bar. There's no floodlights, takedowns, alleys, or anything like that on this bar. This is an earlier J-tube bar. It's not a V-tube bar, but it's a J-tube bar. It doesn't have any rapid rate options, and it was one of the earlier versions of the J-tubes. The steady burn lights, again, are pretty bright to the front, which is why they didn't always do both sides. The rear of this bar has just 1 amber and 1 red flasher, and you'll also notice the strobe on the amber side is amber as well. So that's an option some places did sometimes. I also have an Advantage light bar that meets California Spec. It has a single steady red light. The other side is a halogen takedown. That was an option frequently seen. There's no blue on this bar at all. I don't know if this is a fire command vehicle or what this was, but it also has a center preemption strobe, Opticom, which appears to be factory as well. So this bar had external front flashers, internal California light, internal takedown, and then to the rear the flashers were internal. So this is a take where you have the steady red only on one side of the light bar, which in some cases allowed for a little bit more flexibility. So light bars, we've covered the light bars that I wanted to show from my collection. We need to move on to the next part of California lights, which is the dash, deck, visor, slick top lights. California is pretty notorious for having slick top vehicles. A lot of times you get a single red to the front and an amber and blue to the rear. This has been going on as long as directional lamps were manufactured, so for a very long time. There are lots of ways this can be set up. Originally, there were some steady burn rear options as well. It just really depended on the department and the setup and the vehicle, but there was always a steady red to the front and a flashing amber to the rear of some type. Sometimes you did get a blue to the front as well. Whelen made a variety of different models. The DashMaster or Dash Flasher or Deckmaster, which is the Micro Max halogen or strobe version of their dash lamp, was the initial. Everything from a single steady burn to a dual unit with a steady burn and a flasher, or a dual unit with a steady burn and a strobe. So this is just the steady burn option on the 3 front models. And then the 3 front models here, you can see the one has a halogen flasher, one has a strobe on the blue side, and the other one is just a red lamp. We're not activating the rear model yet, which is off to the left. Whether or not these are factory is often up for debate. I've opened these up and I don't see any wiring that looks non-factory, although it is absolutely a possibility that these are modified by departments. I've never seen literature that shows there's a specific California model that has a steady burn and a strobe or a flasher, but I've seen a lot of them. So whether it's a department modification or not, they were common. The rear deck here we've got going the amber and the blue flasher. That could be paired with any of the 3 lights to the left. And there is a faster flash rate option on the halogen versions. I believe that rate falls just outside of the acceptable rate for California. You can see here, it's just, I think it's a little bit faster than what they specify, but it is still present in the lamps, in the lights, but the wire for it is actually not present. I just connected it to show what it does. But in the slow motion, you can see that you've got a double flash strobe on the strobe version, and the halogen versions are a slower single flash. Again, these look very factory to me, but I don't have any proof that this was ever a factory model. Then we moved to the Deckmaster, which was 2 DashMaster 2s hooked together. And in this case, we've got red and blue and red and amber. We've got the blue and amber flashing together, and then the 2 reds flashing together. They are synchronized. That was part of the product offering. And then the other part of this product offering was that you could cut off 2 of the lamps. In this case, the reds get cut off, so you would have the amber and blue together. But as you can see, you've got the amber and the red alternating, and the red and the blue alternating. So the blue on the right and the amber on the left would fire at the same time, and then the 2 reds would fire at the same time. Unfortunately, this part of the video is kind of hard to see, but that's the way it works. It's switched by a switch that in the up position does all 4, and in the down position does just the 2. And because of the nature of a California setup, when doing just 2, it would be the blue and the amber that we would activate. So here we're going to activate just the blue and the amber. We've cut off the reds. The blue and the amber actually simultaneously flash. So you've got the flashing of the blue and the amber, then a pause where the reds would flash. So you're not alternating the blue and the red, or the blue and the amber in this case. You're flashing them together and cutting off the red. That's the way this product works, and usually when set up in a California setup, one of the modes that you operate in is amber only or blue only to the rear. So this supports that by cutting off the red to the rear. Again, this is somewhat difficult to film, and this system was not very common and it didn't work very well. I did a whole nother video about this system of linking together two DashMeister 2s. If you want to check that out, I'll put a link. But this is the way that that would be used in a California setup. The next interior light that Whelen offered was the DashMeiser. They had many options. First, what I'll do is I'll show the two most common California options against their DashMaster counterparts. So here we're just steady burning the steady burn portions. But we've got a strobe and a halogen flasher model. We've got red steady burns in both, or all four, and then we've got the blues being strobes on the right and the blues being halogen flashers on the left. These are essentially the same product. They're just, one of them is the DashMeiser and one of them is the DashMaster. So they're the same idea. They're just the newer DashMeiser model being on top. They ported over a lot of the options, including the all halogen flasher version, which I actually don't have for the rear deck. They called them DashMeiser Plus when they had internal power supplies, and just DashMeiser when they didn't. This is a look at the actual California notation. The other thing the DashMeiser brought to the table was a 3-head model that gave you the ability to have both red and blue strobes to the front while still having a steady red. You could also use that as a takedown, but that was awful. So usually you saw this 3-head model as a California product. Again, it could be used for anything you wanted, but it was a steady burn halogen. So these are the three main front facing models. I also don't have a single halogen steady burn model. They did have that as well. But these are the models that provide warning other than the red steady burn. So you've got the blue strobe, red steady burn. You've got the red steady burn with the blue and red strobe, and then you've got the red steady burn with the flashing halogen blue. So those are the three main models if you don't count stuff that would be for the rear, and you don't count single units that would be steady burn only. As far as rear warning in a DashMeiser package, like I said, you would have the option of having an all halogen setup, usually amber blue flashers. Sometimes you would see a group of two units, and kind of set up like the Deckmaster unit that I showed for the DashMaster, where they were synchronized, sometimes in strobe, sometimes in halogen. However, usually an external flasher or external strobe power supply was used once you got to the Miser series, whereas the Master series. It was internal. So what I do have for the rear deck is a specific Aros Stick. This Aros Stick features a 6-lamp traffic arrow, and on the ends it features halogen red and blue lamps that have the option to flash or steady burn. This functions as a normal halogen arrow stick would. It can be used completely just as a halogen arrow stick, or it can be used in worn mode just like any other halogen arrow bar. And then you can independently flash the end flashers, or you could set the end flashers to steady burn. Again, this is all independent of the arrow function, although they were commonly used together. Probably the most common would be the flashing amber with the steady burn red and blue, or the flashing amber with the flashing red and blue, although the arrow functions with both the flashing and the steady burn red and blue were used. Arrow bars are very frequently ignored on both fire and police vehicles. They're often left in flash mode. California, specifically Highway Patrol, is a little bit better about using them than a lot of agencies. But regardless, you would see the amber being left in flash mode, and then the question would be, what position or priority were you in to either have steady burning or flashing red and blue end lamps. The switching for this is depends on the setup, but usually the traffic arrow was a separate function than the end lamps, although there were scenarios where you would have them wired in a way such that the arrow would come on in certain circumstances, but I'm not getting into the switching. Again, the most common was the flashing amber and the steady burn or flashing end lamps. So that kind of wraps up the California Whelen tour of what I currently have on hand. I actually have a few more things that I didn't picture. They don't really add a lot to the discussion, but I do have a few more that I might show at a later date. But I think this kind of makes the point about what California lights were and what Whelen offered both on the roof and inside the vehicle. So thanks for watching, and please like and subscribe, and have a great day.